Noel T. Manning II here. Appreciate you spending time with us always, whether you're doing that through C19 TV or through WGWG, the radio version, the podcast version. We appreciate you no matter how you choose to spend time with us. Thomas Manning joining us over there in Studio Z, as in Zelda, or actually you got to do an interview, Thomas, set in on an interview with a filmmaker with a Z for the first name. What was that?
Zendaya last night.
Zendaya, yeah. So that's
Q&A.
Studio Zendaya over there. Houston Coley joining us. Houston, good to see you, man. Glad you're here.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Thanks.
Houston is a lover of film. He's got a YouTube channel as well that's got about 3 followers, which is pretty good. And it's got several
I worked
thousand.
hard to get those 3. It was really quite
Hey man, that's kind of this show. We got 3 viewers, and we'll take all 3 of them. And with you being added, you'll probably watch the show, so it'll be 4. So we'll accept that. We're glad to have you join us. Thomas has been telling me about you for quite a while, and he turned me on to your work. And man, you've got some amazing work that we're going to talk about as well. And just appreciate you taking the time, man.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I have never been like really interviewed about my YouTube channel before or anything like that. So I'm kind of a rookie to that. But I'm good at talking about myself. That's always something I enjoy. So
that's all we need for this to be a successful show, just for you to talk about yourself as much as possible. We'll be good to go.
Well, with that in mind, let's dive in. But before we do, if you're joining this show for the very first time and you're wondering what the heck we do, well, it's kind of in the title. Meet Me at the Movies. We talk movies, and it's all over the place. Everything from giving you reviews to giving you some critical analysis, to having some hot topics, to having filmmakers and film critics. And so today we are glad to have Houston Coley. So Houston, let's talk about your love of film and cinema, and give us some background on how you got into this and where that love comes from.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of it came from my parents. I love seeing this father-son duo, because I have a similar sort of father-son duo with my dad, I think, sometimes. My dad directed a movie when I was 11 called Cracker Jack. And before that, he was a playwright and did a lot of independent theater. And so I grew up around that world of theater and then film. And more than that, just story, I think, was a huge part of my childhood. And my mom is a huge literature major and everything. And so that was very much infused in me from day one. The thing that I don't think they really put in me was my love of Lego, which was what started my YouTube channel in the first place. I started doing Lego reviews and news and stop motion brick films. And I think even more so than my parents at first, that was what really got me into film, was that most Lego sets are based on movies. And so of course I started loving movies through that, but also stop motion really, I think, gives you learn the basics of what filmmaking is on a micro level. And you don't need, most directors need an army to accomplish their evil doing. And with stop motion animation, like, you can do it all with just Lego sets and with clay or things like that. And so I think, doing stop motion and doing stuff with Lego really taught me the basics of filmmaking. And then I started to want to translate that into the bigger world. And then, I'm definitely, I think I will probably end up looking back and thinking that, like, the Avengers was my Star Wars, because I would say that, like, Marvel, as much as, I could acknowledge that Marvel is a mainstream kind of thing and there are much better films out there, Marvel definitely introduced me to the love and joy of movies. I think Marvel and Harry Potter was a big part of that too. Harry Potter, I think, was a similar thing of, like, seeing film wizardry, like seeing, how'd they do that? Like the special effects and the set pieces and the, how they do the costumes and the props and everything. I loved collecting Harry Potter props when I was younger and stuff. And so I think all those things, they're not particularly, like, I think a lot of people came to love film because of Harry Potter and because of Marvel and things like that. But those were probably several of the factors that led me to want to talk about movies a lot.
Awesome. Thomas, dive in, buddy. I see you have a question.
Yeah. So, it started out for you, your film fandom, with blockbusters like Harry Potter and Marvel. So how do you kind of transition from that and then really dig deeper into some of the indie art house films which I know that you're a big fan of a lot of those. Like Parasite was your favorite film of last year because it was probably the best film of last year.
Yeah.
But it's not, a massive blockbuster. It's just one of those that, the film Twitter, film fandoms kind of settle on. So how do you kind of make that transition from the big blockbusters into some of the indie films as a fan?
Yeah, I think I don't know necessarily if there was like one particular like turning point or something. It often feels like a natural progression of sort of diving deeper into a love of film. Certainly, like the first thought that came to my mind was, well, most people say Marvel movies aren't high art, and so that makes you want to go check out high art, right? So I think definitely it was like wanting to just learn more about the film world and see what else is out there. Though also, my dad has been heavily involved in the Oscars for many years, not like in the production of them, but in reviewing them, interpreting them, talking about what the Oscars say about the culture. And so for many years, and that probably could have been part of the first answer, like I was probably paying attention to the Oscar nominees since I was like 8 years old or so. And my parents would always watch all of them. And my dad would be looking through what these movies say about the culture and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think that definitely instilled a sense in me of like, I want to know what the artists and the prophets of our year are saying at this given moment. And I think that's definitely something that, I don't know, that might be something that is a little bit more, I hate to say, oh, I'm so unique, but like that is something that I think sometimes distinguishes how I think about film from other people, is that I love talking about film and its relation to culture and the ways that movies influence the culture, the ways that culture influences movies, and that relationship. My next video coming up is I want to talk about the character of Uncle Iroh in Avatar, and how I think the reason that people connected with Uncle Iroh, especially Gen Z and people my age connected with Uncle Iroh so much this past year when Avatar had this huge resurgence, was because he's kind of like, he's like what young people wish old people would be for them. Like he's like the anti-boomer, basically. No offense to boomers, but like I think he represents something in people's minds that they maybe don't even consciously realize. And so that's just like one example of a thing where I'm like, I love exploring that relationship and what this says about people and why people are connecting with this, even if something's not like a masterpiece. I'm like, okay, so like The Greatest Showman, it's a hugely popular movie, like wildly popular. It's also like not a masterpiece at all, but I think it's really interesting that it has connected with people so heavily. And I love exploring that relationship,
What was the first film that you actually took on with that in mind, exploring the culture and thinking about it? Do you remember?
Like when I was a kid, my parents would look at the superhero movies that I loved and even Harry Potter, and want to help me relate that to my life and to our beliefs and things, and help me explore that on a deeper level and not just have it be something that goes over the surface. And so that may have been part of it. Parasite is the most recent thing that just pops into my head that I freaking adore. Like Parasite is an obvious example where it has a social commentary to it that's very clear. But I love looking at things as well that don't necessarily have an obvious social commentary to them, but it's like, why are people connecting with this thing? And even, I loved Lego for so much longer than most people do. I still had Lego collections and stuff until I was about 16. And even with that, like I would watch the Lego TV show Ninjago and all these different things that are technically kids shows, and still want to look at like, all right, but what is good about this? Like this is a kids show, but it actually has pretty good storytelling, and wanting to analyze that, and so I like looking for like cultural relevance and just themes in unlikely places, and I think that's why I like to talk about animation on my channel a lot as well.
Yeah, well, it starts with story. I mean, it's got to start with the story, with that source material. But I think, as you mentioned, with any film, if you give it a chance, there is a universal life lesson that can come out of it. Now, sometimes you have to think a little bit more about it, but other times it's just there. But because of the entertainment value, we're not thinking about that lesson and about that message and that theme that really can connect.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that my dad does now, which I work for his company. Man, it's such like I feel like I'm in good company though, in terms of fathers and sons working together and having a, yeah, my dad's company is called Reel, and he does a thing where he takes people's top 10 movies. You get a group of people together. Every person brings their top 10 movies, and they're able to see each other and grow in their understanding of each other through the movies that move them. And
Wow.
I think that's been something that has transformed how I view movies, because I've seen people have their lives changed and have these huge insights come out of Dumb and Dumber and Finding Nemo and like all of these different movies that are not like high art. Maybe Finding Nemo is high art, but just different things that I'm like, I would have never seen that in there. And yet this person is having this really profound and sometimes spiritual significance coming out of this story. And it's taught me to not be pretentious about judging people for the movies that they connect with, you know?
I need to talk to your dad. He sounds like a cool guy.
Yeah.
So as someone who was familiar with the art of filmmaking from your study of Lego and Lego animation, and then you studied just film in general, how did you translate what you learned there into your development of video essays on YouTube and almost featurettes and mini documentaries? Because you look at your videos, they have their own structure and their own narrative to them. So what was that process kind of like?
Yeah, I think, you know, as with many things, it started with imitation. I loved Every Painting and Nerdwriter and some of those more prominent video essay channels at the time. And there was I think I was part of this movement around 2016 or so, when like everyone started making video essays, and many of them felt very much the same, including mine. And, you know, I mean, that had been how it was with Lego too. Like when I started doing Lego, I really loved these channels like The Brick Show and Michael MGF and all these different people who were my heroes. And I was like, I want to do what they do. And so I did. And then it sort of morphed into its own identity. And it was the same thing with video essays, where at first I was just imitating Nerdwriter, taking it very seriously, doing sort of, you know, contemplative, almost whispery narration, talking about the profound themes of this movie. And then it morphed into, I really wanted things to be more personal, I think was a huge thing for me. I wanted to be able to talk about my personal connection to a movie rather than trying to be like objective and talking about the facts and the plot holes and stuff. I wanted it to be positive. I wanted to make videos that would uplift movies that I loved rather than tear anything down. And then I also think, I wanted things that felt like an experience. Like they didn't feel like a throwaway video. Like I wanted my videos to feel like, okay, it's like got a 3-act structure and stuff, and it's got a title card at the beginning and a score to it and everything. And in some ways that can be a hindrance sometimes. Like I think at the moment I'm trying my best to move towards like being able to make some more videos that are casual from time to time. I actually built this set that I'm in right now because I wanted a place that I could feel comfortable to record and just like turn on the camera and make a video, which I have yet to do, because almost everything I have an idea and then I'm like, all right, I need to write like 10 pages of notes and research everything that I can about this idea and stuff. And so, yeah, once I started making videos that were like 30 minutes long, it's been hard to walk myself off that ledge. But I do, when I make a video that's 30 minutes, I do think I'm a lot more satisfied than making a video that's sort of casual and unscripted, because I'm like, I perfected this to the best of my abilities, and it feels like you're watching, you know, something that is a work in and of itself and not just a commentary track, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And the videos that you produce, it's obvious for anybody who knows about filmmaking or video editing and production. There's a lot of work, a lot of research that goes into it, and it shows. It really shows.
Thanks.
You're watching Meet Me the Movies right here on C19 TV, and you may be listening through WGWG. Again, we do appreciate it. Houston Coley is our guest. Thomas Manning along with me. We're going to take a quick intermission. I'm Noel T. Manning II. We are taking a quick intermission. We're going to come back and talk more about Houston Coley's work and his YouTube channel right here, and film, of course, film right here on Meet Me at the Movies.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star.
Hi, and welcome back into Meet Me in the Movies. I'm Thomas Manning here with Noel Manning, and we have our special guest, Houston Coley, who we're so glad could join us. And Houston, before the show, you were telling us a little bit about a documentary that you're in the middle of production on, and you were talking about how the pandemic has opened up some interesting opportunities with this production. So just walk us through what this documentary is and what are some of your favorite parts about what you've been able to do with it so far?
Yeah, so at the moment it is a docu-series. It's going to be probably 6 episodes, and my dad and I are working together to produce it. I'm directing, and it's called The Movie Whisperer. And basically the idea, it's very informed by what I talked about in the previous segment, the stuff that my dad does with people's top 10 movies. And basically it's exploring the relationship between movies and culture, and specifically in the first few episodes, the relationship between the Oscars and culture. My dad, I've really grown up with a dad who has a lot of passionate and, for some people, strange beliefs about movies. And he has had the belief for a long time that the movies at the Academy Awards, the slate of the Best Picture nominees, actually foreshadows the culture, and shows us kind of where culture is heading before it happens. And he believes that the Oscars are more capable of doing that because you remove the commerce element from it. The movies at the Oscars are made, at least to some extent, more for art's sake rather than for money. And so he really views artists as the prophets of our generation, as far as that goes. And so, the series is really made to explore the relationship between art and prophecy and artists as prophets, and the idea of, movies and culture. And so, right now we're doing sort of a mix of in-person and Zoom interviews and trying our best to sort of spice it up and see if we can make Zoom interviews interesting. One of the things that we're trying right now is to like have an over-the-shoulder shot where you're seeing the person on the monitor that I'm talking to with Zoom, and then you're seeing over my shoulder me talking to them, and then my reaction shots and everything, so that it's a little bit more dynamic than just a Zoom recording. And then we just a few days ago actually bought 2 Blackmagic cameras to shoot the real segments with, which is like I have never worked with anything as nice as those cameras. I've always just used DSLRs my whole life. And so it's been pretty cool to actually be doing something that feels like, like we're shooting on 4K to like hopefully go to streaming or something. Like that would be awesome, So, yeah.
That's awesome. Hearing you talk about this particular project, I think you're spot on. You and your dad are spot on with looking at the Oscars as kind of a reflection of what's happening, especially when you look at the slate of films that were nominated.
Yeah.
Because I taught a film course a while back, and we looked at, there's a book, I think it's called like 1,001 Films You Must See Before You Die. I may have the title slightly off. I normally do on my titles. Thomas knows that.
I think you're right. I have that book. So,
and they update it every few years.
Yeah.
But what I did is I took that and I would look at films within the decade. And so with that course, we would look at the connection. So we'd look at, what were the best films or the films that were recommended within the 20s, the 1920s.
Yeah.
And we would say, okay, what does that say about culture? What are the themes? What are the things that pop up? And it was really interesting when you look at it by the decade, you really do get a good sense of what is happening and what was happening and the impact that was happening within cinema, but also within the world and within culture. So I'm fascinated by this project. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm glad to hear about that, man.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting things is that it's almost like, I mentioned in the previous segment that my dad does a thing where he takes people's top 10 favorite movies and learns about their character through that. And one of his beliefs about that was the idea that these movies, it's one thing to learn someone's favorite movie and to, be like, all right, here's what it says about you that this is your favorite movie. Like that's sort of a parlor trick. But his belief is that, what's even more impactful is looking at the slate of 10 movies, almost like a canon in and of itself, and being like, all right, what are the common patterns in these movies that this says about this person? And so this documentary is really taking that from, the individual level of how these movies speak to a person through the slate of 10 to a cultural level of like, how do these 10 movies relate to each other? What are they collectively saying to the culture through the ways that they are saying it together? And so the thing that really spurred me on to make it was what happened in 2020, because at the very start of 2020, my dad does a speech at Pinewood Studios here in Atlanta every year about the Oscars. And he did a speech looking at the top, however many movies were nominated last year. I think it was 9 Best Picture nominees. And the common theme that he saw emerge from those movies was the question of, will I be my brother's keeper? And more even bigger than that was the idea of, can we test our devotions as a culture to learn if we will be our brother's keeper? And so he was saying that in January of 2020 and being like, I think that something might happen in the culture this year that's going to test our devotions to each other. And will we take care of each other? Will we look out for each other? You know, and at the time he just thought maybe it'll be the election, you know, something like that, but didn't know at all that this, you know, would be such a crazy year. And so, yeah, that was really what spurred me to want to make this documentary, was to be like, all right, there might be some validity to this, like, you know, so, yeah.
So how many you said how many episodes are you planning to do?
I think it's going to be 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long will each be?
We're looking at like 30-minute episodes.
Wow.
I'm hoping.
Wow.
Yeah. Although the first episode is going to be about 2020. And so that one might be longer than all the other ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your YouTube channel and how that started. You talked about when you kind of launched it and some of the things you were doing. At what point did it really kick up a notch as far as viewers and engagement? Do you remember what that was, and you know, what was it that maybe triggered that?
Yeah, I made videos about Lego for like many years without having a huge uptick in subscribers. I think when I was making Lego videos, it went up to about 7,000 or 8,000 by around 2015, 2016 or so. But once I started making movie videos, it definitely started to increase. And for better or worse, it increases as you make videos about popular things. So
Right.
most of my subscribers, I think, especially in the early days, like I remember going from like 8,000 to 20,000 or something like that in the span of a few days. And that was because of a Marvel video that I did. And then another one of my big blow ups was from another Marvel video. And so people, I definitely think, come for the big stuff, especially stuff about blockbusters. And that's always the hard thing about YouTube is, you know, I want to embrace the tension between, you know, and you have to embrace the tension between things that you really want to make and things that are going to be successful, and hopefully harmonize those things. But sometimes I find myself going on like a one for you, one for me system, where I'm like, you know, I made a video last summer, 2 summers ago now, man, it's been a while, about theme park design and the relationship between video game design and theme park design. And it's maybe my favorite video that I've ever made. And it's also one of my least viewed videos that I've ever made. And after that, I made a video about Marvel or whatever that got a bunch of views. But so it's sort of a, you know, I try to put my heart into everything that I do. But there is also an element at which I'm like, you know, I want to make this thing regardless of if it's going to have views. And so I'm going to do that. And then next time, maybe I'll do something that will be a little bit more relevant to the current, you know, discourse.
Yeah. Finding that balance between what you love, what you want to do, but also what does the audience want to see.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great that you're able to say, okay, I'm not going to give you just the audience stuff. I'm going to give you the stuff that I love too, and that I want to do as well. Thomas, I see you got a question, buddy.
Yeah. So Houston, since you're so in tune with the relationship between filmmaking and the culture, the popular culture, what do you think, if you could pick maybe 1 or 2 filmmakers over the course of your life that you've studied, who do you think kind of defines the culture that we're living in at this particular moment, or has over the past 20 years or so?
Wow, that is a big question. Oh my gosh. I mean, man, because it's hard, because on the one hand, you want to talk about filmmakers who are like famous and making movies that are extremely mainstream. And then on the other hand, there's filmmakers who are not mainstream and yet I think have a lot of relevance to the culture. I don't know. It would end up with me probably just talking about my favorite filmmakers. But yeah, I just have to like think about, you know, I think Greta Gerwig is someone who really gets our generation in a really cool way. That was like the first name that came to mind. And I think about Lady Bird, and I even think about Little Women, and how one of the things that I really loved about the recent Little Women was the fact that she made these characters who lived 200 years ago or 100 years ago. When's the and makes them feel.
It was in the past. It was in the past.
They were sometime in history, you know, and makes them feel like youth today. And you go, oh, like they're not so different, you know, and yet doesn't sacrifice the integrity of the story or the accuracy of the historical period either. And I even see that in Frances Ha a little bit. I think she really understands that age of, you know, single person. So that was someone who came to mind pretty quickly. but yeah, it would be hard. I just have to like rack my brains, because I also think there are filmmakers who just have influenced a lot of people. I don't know if they necessarily have captured something about this like legitimate moment in time, but have influenced a lot of people's childhoods. And so the directors who made Harry Potter, like David Yates and you know, even Alfonso Cuarón and Christopher Columbus, and even Peter Jackson, who made The Lord of the Rings and stuff. Like, I think all of that stuff is very relevant to our to a lot of people my age today. They've grown up with those things. So yeah, I don't know. You're gonna have me thinking about that for a while, so that I'll come up with someone 10 minutes from now and be like, oh, I should have said that person.
Well, I'm now expecting a video essay on those. So,
yeah.
Well, we'll have to bring you back to talk about that, because we are almost out of time. But Houston, I do want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find you, and if there are any final thoughts or comments you want to make sure you share with our audience right here.
Yeah. Not a ton. So I just renamed my YouTube channel. It used to be called Houston Productions 1. Now it's just called Houston Coley. But if you search Houston Productions 1, it'll probably still pop up. So you can search either Houston Coley or Houston Productions 1 on YouTube to get it. My Twitter is @BlockbustedPod. And then I also have a Substack blog where I've been doing a lot of written film essays and things recently. I think it's HoustonProductions1.substack.com. And that's about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Houston, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us right here on Meet Me at the Movies. And we're looking forward to continuing to follow your work.
Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to seeing this collaboration with your dad as well. So I'm excited about that, and we'll follow that as well. Thomas Manning, where can people find your work other than right here? There's some other places they can find it too.
Find me on elementsofmadness.com, where I do some writing and interviewing as well for Douglas Davidson's website. So head over to elementsofmadness.com.
All right. For Thomas Manning, for Houston Coley, I'm Noel T. Manning II, right here on Meet Me at the Movies. We do appreciate you. You can email us at info@c19.tv. We do take that viewer and non-viewer mail, and we'll share it if we want to. So until next time, I'm Noel T. Manning II saying goodbye, and that is a wrap.